It was very difficult at the time when we were growing up, because it was apartheid South Africa. Any sort of consumption that we had from TV was not something that we could identify with. No one looked like me on TV, and the world just seemed so far off, and so I couldn't it did not resonate with me. And so books really helped me to dream, to go into worlds far, far, far away, and even inspire the career that I have today.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today I'm honored to be joined by Sonwabise Mzinyathi, Senior Manager, Global Policy and Government Affairs of Global Citizen. Sonwabise started her career in diplomacy and was posted as a diplomat for South Africa and New Delhi, India. She left diplomacy to join corporate and has worked for PR agencies, tech, and FinTech companies including TBWA's Magna Carta, Cisco, and Refinitiv, a London Stock Exchange business. Currently, she is in the NGO space working for global advocacy NGO Global Citizen. She also serves on several boards and committees, including the SA Women and ICT Forum, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment ICT Sector Council, and the Cisco Charitable Foundation Trust, and owns several companies. Her passion is using technology to address social ills. Sonwabise Mzinyathi, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders all the way from South Africa. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm very good. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. I have to tell you, Sonwabise, I've been looking over your profile and the different things that you're working on. It's inspiring. You know, the organizations you're a part of, the mission that you're driving, whether it's as a senior manager in Global Citizen, working to end poverty, or women in tech, or the 10 other things that you're doing. It's just remarkable, and I'm excited in these next 20 minutes to understand you better and your life and your experiences, what you've learned about equality and inequality. And I'd love to quickly just start with the situation we're in right now. We almost had to reschedule this episode because it is very dark where it's already nighttime and it's winter and the electricity is not working, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So in South Africa, we have something called load shedding because the government has not been maintaining the electricity stations for a long time. And also, it's just undercapacitated in terms of how many people it can accommodate and how many households it can accommodate at a time. And so it has to go through a process of load shedding, which is, it has different stages. Even it gets announced that at this time of the day your area is going to be load shed for an hour, 2 hours, and we've just had to learn to live with it and live around it. But what the nice thing is that the president recently announced an increase in one of our policies that will allow citizens to generate their own electricity, but also for private sector to come in and start generating electricity that they can then sell. So if any of your listeners are interested in electricity and they would like to come into South Africa, please, they must come and and do us a favor.
Amazing. And so this is speaking also to what it sounds like is a common thread around a lot of the things that you're working on, this question of inequality, uplifting societies and bridging gaps. Sonwabise, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what led you to be almost, a fighter for these ideals.
Right. So I'm an 80s baby, and I grew up smack bang in the middle of apartheid South Africa. And just witnessing and growing up in that environment has just led me towards a career path that is interested in development and in bridging inequalities. And most of any role in any organizations that I've worked with have lended themselves or had values that were bridging the inequality gap in some way, some shape or form. I'm currently working for Global Citizen, and as many of your listeners will know, Global Citizen seeks to end extreme poverty by 2030 by getting a really great mix of both policy and pop to get citizens, firstly, to be more involved in policy making and in things that impact their communities and the world at large, but also then to get governments to bridge policy gaps that aren't addressing poverty, that aren't addressing equity as they should. And lastly, also working towards, importantly, working towards the Sustainable Development Goals and meeting them by 2030. And then I also do other work within the technology space. I love technology. And just for me, one of my greatest passions is how technology can bridge the inequality gap in real time. And I get to do this every single day, which is quite fantastic. So I sit on the board of
Incredible.
the SA Women in ICT Forum. And we really do a lot of work around bridging the inequality gap. One of the other challenges in South Africa, for instance, is gender-based violence. And so we built out a platform, an online engagement platform that links to government services to help people who are impacted by gender-based violence to be able to have access to those services. And also to be able to rate the services they get from government so that government can improve on those services. So I'm really, really passionate about technology and how it really drives solutions and innovations in real time. Of course, technology is not the only solution. There's a whole combination of things that need to happen, but technology definitely bridges the connectivity gap.
Amazing. And also we generally forgot that you're a board trustee of the Cisco Foundation Charitable Trust.
Yes.
Now, within Global Citizen, and before we dive into your position in Global Citizen and what's happening there, can you paint me, a picture of, where we are today in terms of the world? So we are in, almost July of 2021. What is the situation around the world in terms of extreme poverty, and where is Global Citizen on its path?
Right. So, we've all just been through a pandemic. Most countries are still currently going through a pandemic. Some have successfully been able to vaccinate their citizens. However, when we as global citizens last started doing research on the impact of the pandemic, we found, that millions of people are going to go into extreme poverty as a result of the pandemic. We found that the education is going to digress, and more children will actually drop out of school because they can't afford to be online. They don't have access to computers. Teachers don't know how to teach digitally. They were never prepared for such an instance. And just access to computers. You'll be so surprised, Michael, at how many children actually do not have access to the internet, and how many adults know the internet but actually have never ever used the internet in their lifetime. In many developing countries, this is the situation. And also hunger, and how many people are going to go hungry because they've lost their jobs. Many small businesses have had to shut down. Even large businesses have actually had to go into bankruptcy because of COVID-19. And so all those elements have driven us at Global Citizen to launch something called the Recovery Plan for the World. And we've received so much support from the USA. Secretary John Kerry was part of our launch in February. President Ramaphosa here in South Africa. We had a lot of artists who were also part of that launch, and supporting us in many countries, supporting us on that recovery plan. And we did it in conjunction with the WHO, Dr. Tedros's office, as well as the European Union Commission, President van der Leyen. And so really important for us is to get the world back on a path of recovery. And we've identified 5 issues which will actually get the world back into a path of recovery. The first being ending the pandemic. We recently did a big global program called VATS Live, where we raised
Hmm.
about 26 million
Wow.
doses to go through the COVAX facility for low and low to middle income countries, and $302 million, which will go to the ACT Accelerator to help with medical technologies, tests, and treatments for low and low middle income countries. The second sort of focus is around hunger and stopping hunger. The third one is on education and resuming learning, but also bridging the digital divide in education, right? And then the fourth one is protecting the planet. Environment and sustainability is a very important pillar of ours. And lastly, equity, and that's really around driving um, economic justice, driving inclusion, and just gender empowerment, as well as identification of human rights as a whole.
Wow. A lot to unpack. Now, within your position in Global Citizen, tell me a little bit about your day-to-day work. And how does an organization like Global Citizen actually, think through how do you go and manage these five, verticals that you just touched on?
Yeah, we are quite a really organized machine that works very, very well from a global perspective, but also knowing how to localize our global priorities. So, for
Hmm.
instance, while we have these big global ambitions, we also look at countries and what are the priorities in those countries. What is the immediate need for those countries, and that differs from country to country, right? Here in South Africa, the most important thing right now is ending the pandemic and it's resuming learning. Or if you go to another country like Rwanda, protecting the planet is very, very important for Rwanda. If you go to Nigeria, equity and education, very, very, very important pillars. So learning how to take our global strategies and localize them for each and every single corner of the world in which we operated. And we are truly global. We're in Pan Asia, we're in Australia, we're in Europe, we are in Africa, and in North and South America. Because, not everything is a one size fits all. We always ensure that whatever we're doing is driving that appropriate um, measure and impact for that specific region. But ultimately, we then all come back together as a global organization to drive our global mandate, which is ending extreme poverty, and in anything that is sort of impacting that mandate, we then downstream it to localize it to our various other pillar policy areas.
So what is actually, your role as senior manager of global policy and government affairs? What does that mean? What does it mean, government affairs, in the context of Global Citizen?
Right. Very good question, because it truly does mean different things for different organizations. For us, my role really, I sort of drive the strategy around which policy focus areas we're going to be advocating for in the Southern and East Africa region, as well as West Africa. And then the government affairs element comes into play, where we then take those policy areas and have to drive the advocacy programs with government to ensure that those policy areas are met, that new commitments are made by governments to address those policy gaps, and then also working with NGOs, working with corporates, because while as the policies can be met and the gaps in the policies can be addressed, the policies then have to be implemented. Government can only create an enabling environment, but ultimately it's corporates, it's citizens, NGOs, civil society that actually have to drive the implementation of those policies. So the second part of it, of my role, is really working with NGOs, corporates, to create enabling environments for those policies to thrive. So, for instance, on this bridging the digital divide in education, we're currently working with the tech sector, the telcos, and various other corporates here in South Africa to make financial and in kind commitments towards bridging the digital divide in South Africa. An example, just a practical example of how that would look like, is one of our partners is going to be has committed over 2 million rands to drive fiber connectivity in remote schools. So schools that were not previously connected, they will now be connecting those schools as part of their commitment. There's another telco that is going to be giving bursary programs for children from rural areas to study animation and gaming. So various different types of commitments by what we're calling a telco coalition, calling it a tech coalition, basically, of various South African companies coming together to bridge the digital divide in education.
Incredible. Now, tell me a little bit more about your entrance into this world. You were deep into technology as well. You're already working with incredible companies. You could have chosen to go on a different path, probably a much more luxurious path. Why spend your time now in Global Citizen? Beyond just the grand vision of ending poverty.
I don't know, Michael. I think we all get born for a certain purpose, for a certain season, and for whatever reason. And you'll often find that purpose in the work that you do. And maybe yours through this podcast is to tell stories and other people and to, highlight what people are doing around the world. And that for you is what you think you're here to serve, which is very, very critical. Telling stories is a very, very important part of humanity, creativity, but also um, driving inspiration around the world. Mine really is bridging the digital divide. I have I have a sense and urge every day to just wake up and connect people and to bridge inequality and to do whatever I can in whatever roles that I've been given and platforms that I have been given to bridge inequality, or any kind of business that I've ever been involved in has always seeked to do this, or seek to drive development in some shape or form. And this for me really, it's the reason I wake up at night. I wake up in the morning. It's the reason why I breathe and live.
Amazing. Sonwabise, this was so inspiring. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with me. We're not done just yet. I want to spend the last couple of minutes going back and to talking about you. And take me back to your childhood. What really fascinated you as a kid before you knew, that you're going to be doing all these amazing things? What really fascinated you?
It was books. Books fascinated me. I think books allowed me to dream and to go into worlds that drove my imagination, and also to learn so much about other people's cultures, other countries, what is happening in other worlds, but also to see myself in those stories. It was very difficult at the time when we were growing up, because it was apartheid South Africa. Any sort of consumption that we had from TV was not something that we could identify with. No one looked like me on TV, and the world just seemed so far off, and so I couldn't it did not resonate with me. And so books really helped me to dream, to go into worlds far, far, far away, and even inspire the career that I have today. Um, and I'll tell you why I mentioned the TV and the watching and what you consume and how that inspires dreams. In the US has a lot of female astronauts, and that's because of Star Wars. Because in Star Wars, there was that amazing, amazing, amazing female astronauts, right? And a lot of them. And so the US, because a lot of children grew up watching Star Wars, then they believed that they could become astronauts, that as females, they could become astronauts. So what we consume, what we watch, the content that we tell, which is in line with what you do, is really, really critical. And it's a very, very important part of driving equality in itself. And so I found that in books.
Wow. And where do you gain a source of inspiration today?
I think it's my mother. She's she's always fighting for herself, and I always tell her that her fighting for herself allows me to fight for myself. And fighting for yourself basically is being a courageous leader. It's being brave enough to get onto your podcast. It's being brave enough to think that you can change the world and work for Global Citizen and impact 1 million lives at a time. You know,
Wow.
that is so important for me. When she fights for herself, it lets me fight for myself. But also other people who I may not see or know that they're watching my story and watching my life, it helps them fight for themselves and believe that truly they can be and do whatever it is they want to do. And then also my kids, because they ask me the most absurd questions, Michael. My kids ask me crazy questions. And then it gets me thinking, oh, goodness, I actually need to read up about that. Oh, I need to do something about that. Or I need to act on that. And that really stretches me as a person. It really does stretch me because they get me thinking in directions I never ever thought about.
Sonwabise is so cool. And 3 words that you would describe yourself.
I would describe myself as a go getter, really progressive, and connector.
Sonwabise, thank you so much. I hope the power comes back on. Thank you for taking the time to share your story with me. I'm inspired by your journey, your mission, your vision, your execution. Thank you for everything and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. You too. Stay safe.